Welcome back to Kinesiologically Thinking. Today we'll be covering the vertebral column. This unique area of anatomy is one of our favorites, so listen, take notes, and be ready for a mini quiz at the end of the video. First, we'll start off by looking at the 4 divisions of the vertebral column. These divisions in order from superior to inferior are cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. There are 7 cervical vertebrae, denoted as C1 to C7, 12 thoracic vertebrae, denoted as T1 to T12, 5 lumbar vertebrae, L1, L5, and the sacrum plus coccyx make up our sacral division. In total, there are 33 vertebrae in the adult human. Now, let's visualize our different vertebrae divisions on the vertebral column. From this animation, we can see the divisions of our cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral vertebrae. Appreciate the increasing size of vertebrae as we head inferior down the vertebral column, important to support the body's weight. So, when looking at an individual vertebrae, what are the main structures that make it up? Well, first we have our vertebral body. This is the thick central piece on the vertebrae, and it's important for the weight-bearing function of the vertebral column. Next, the opening of the vertebrae is called the vertebral foramen. This is where our spinal cord is going to run through within the vertebral column, the whole grouping of them called the vertebral foramina. Then we have what is called the vertebral arch. When I first learned about this piece of anatomy, I was admittedly a bit confused, so I'm going to break it down for you. The vertebral arch is essentially a general name for 2 very important attachment points of the vertebrae. By attachment points, I mean where muscles may attach. The pedicle is the more vertical portion of the vertebrae around the vertebral foramen, while the lamina is the more horizontal portion of the vertebrae around the vertebral foramen. Note that there is a pedicle and lamina on both sides of the vertebrae, left and right. Now this is where the attachment relationship comes in. Attachments on the vertebrae occur at points we call processes. And there are 7 processes that arise from the vertebral arch. There are 3 processes that arise from where the pedicle and the lamina meet, meaning total of 6 as there is a lamina and pedicle on each side of the vertebrae. Additionally, there is 1 process where the lamina on one side meets the lamina on the other side, resulting in a total of 7 processes of the vertebral arch. Let's look at the processes more specifically. The first is the spinous process. It's that pointy one that you can actually feel if you gently trace down your back or even slightly see if someone bends forward in front of you, the part of your spine that is facing directly posterior. This process arises from the lamina on one side meeting the lamina on the other. It is a very important muscle attachment point. Next, we have the transverse processes. Note the plural referring to the 2 that we have, one on each side of the vertebrae that's sticking out horizontally. This process is one of the processes that arises from the laminae meeting the pedicles. Again, this is a very important muscle attachment point. The other processes that arise from where the lamina meets the pedicle are the articular processes. There are 4 in total with 2, one on each side, being superior and 2 being inferior. As the name suggests, the superior articular processes are right where the lamina and pedicle meets on the superior aspect of the articular process, which we see from a superior view of the vertebrae in the top right corner on your screen, and the inferior articular processes are on the inferior surface, where the pedicle and lamina meets, which we can see from this lateral view on the bottom of your screen. Another important landmark to consider is the intervertebral foramen. These foramina arise from spaces on either side of the vertebral column when we stack the vertebrae on top of each other. These foramina are important because it is where the spinal nerves will exit to branch out and send signals to the body from the spinal cord, which we can slightly visualize with this animation, seeing the yellow string-like features peeking out from these intervertebral foramina. The name is a very good hint for where to find these foramina, literally meaning in between vertebrae. Now that we know what makes up a vertebrae, let's take a look at our different types of vertebrae and what makes each unique. As stated earlier in the video, we have lumbar, thoracic, and cervical vertebrae. But how do we tell the difference? That's what we'll dive into now. Starting off with our big guys, we have the lumbar vertebrae. Note that these vertebrae have the largest vertebral bodies, and their processes make it look exactly like the head of a moose. So, if you have to identify these vertebrae, just remember big, thick vertebral bodies and look for your moose friend Todd or Albus. Next, we have our mid-sized vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae. There are many key features that help to identify these vertebrae. Firstly, you probably notice the long spinous process compared to that of our lumbar vertebrae. The processes also make this type of vertebrae look a lot like a giraffe. And the vertebral body of these vertebrae typically looks like a heart shape. The heart-shaped vertebral body is a great way to remember the placement of the thoracic vertebrae, right in the thorax, where the heart is found. Then we have our cervical vertebrae found right in our neck region. These are probably some of the most unique anatomical features of our body. The typical cervical vertebrae has a bifurcated spinous process and has foramen within the transverse process is important for early nerve branching. Not only are they special in extra features, C1 and C2 vertebrae actually look pretty different from their other cervical counterparts. Looking to the right side of your screen, we see C1 referred to as atlas and C2 referred to axis. When we stack them, we see that C2 perfectly allows C1 to rotate. Now, why would this be an important feature? So that our neck can move around. Without this anatomical feature, you never would be able to shake your head no when your prof asks if you want to dive into the next lecture instead of being let out 10 minutes early. Finally, we have the sacrum and the coccyx. So, even though the sacrum is a lot different looking than the rest of our vertebral column, it is actually a series of sacral vertebrae fused together. The holes that we see are its intervertebral foramina. And we can remember how many vertebrae are fused for each part, the sacrum with 5s5 and the coccyx with 4co4. Now it's time to see how well you know the vertebral column. Quiz time! You'll have 20 seconds to answer each question. Good luck and let us know how you did in the comments. Question number 1. Which vertebrae type has foramina in the transverse processes? That would be the cervical vertebrae. Remember that it has this as one of its unique features, in addition to a bifurcated spinous process. Question number 2. How many processes are there on a vertebrae? You'll get a bonus points if you list them all. Time's up. The answer is 7. And for a bonus points, the complete list is spinous process, transverse process, superior articular process, and inferior articular process. 1 point for each one you correctly listed. Question number 3. How many vertebrae are there? Bonus points for listing how many of each type. Answer time, a total of 33 vertebrae. And for bonus points, 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 4 coccygeal. 1 point for each one you correctly listed. Question number 4. What is the name of this vertebrae? If you put down Atlas or C1, you got it right. Great job! A good way to remember this one is it's lacking that distinct spinous process and vertebral body. Final question, which vertebrae type is this? The correct answer is the lumbar lumbar vertebrae. Hopefully you identified this through its large vertebral body and moose-shaped head. Thanks Albus and Todd. And that's it for our quiz review. Did you get a full 14 points? Let us know in the comments, we would love to hear. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed. Subscribe for more anatomy content and quizzes to fuel your study sessions. See you next time.